Hello, Abnormal Family. Good to see all of you guys. Wanted to let you know the fundraiser for Hunter will be this Saturday at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. My mom should be able to make it. The last one we had planned, we had a family emergency come up to where she had to be out of pocket. But it will happen Saturday, so everybody that is going to stand for Hunter, be there Saturday at 7 p.m. We're doing a little fundraiser, and Mom's going to talk about things that happened at my granny's and to her when she was a child. Some of the stories I told you, you're going to hear from the real person that experienced a lot of that stuff. Let's get into today's encounter. Excuse me. In the early summer of 1996, my father took me out hunting with him after 3 years of constant nagging. I was 18, Mike, and this is a sad story for me, and it was hard for me to share this. At the time, and I in desperate need of something to do before I had to go back to school in 3 weeks. My father always boasted about the deer he hunted when I was a child. Dinner usually meant I had to eat some of the deer meat. I never bothered me that the place where he killed most of the deer was in the woods behind our house. The woods never bothered me either, and I used to fall asleep listening to the sounds coming from it. That is, until the night my mother died. Our two-story home didn't have any locks, except for the front and back door. My room was on the top floor with the window open at the top of the bed. Sorry, Mike, at the foot of my bed. Sorry about that, guys. I couldn't sleep without it open, even if just a crack. It was 68 degrees and I was sweating like crazy. My mom convinced my father to take her with him on another one of his hunts. The previous night they hadn't been back in 3 days. This was nothing new to me, since my dad usually spent a 6-day out or there, or here and there, or 5 days here and there, and if I wanted to find out, I would at least wait for 2 more days. Now, I may not have been afraid of the woods in the daytime, but at night I felt extremely uneasy when I looked into it. But at around 3 in the morning, bang, 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 3 gunshots, followed by a loud scream. I jumped out of bed and raced to the window to see what was out there, but I saw nothing. Then my father burst out of the woods with his rifle in hand in a mad dash for the back door. But he stopped and quickly turned around. He pointed his rifle at the woods and fired 2 more times before pounding on the back door. In a panic scream, he yelled, "Please let me in! Please!" I ran down the stairs as fast as I could to the back door in seconds. I unlocked the door. Nearly knocking me over, he came in quickly, shut the door behind him. His mouth was gaped open as he slid down to the floor, as if he were trying to scream, but he couldn't no longer. He was pale and his eyes were wide open. He was scaring me just by the way he looked. Looking him over, I saw blood dripping from his bloodied hands. His once clean clothes were covered in mud and blood. "What happened?" I asked, but he said nothing, not even a whisper. I don't know what the hell could have even happened. He was frightened, and he comes running and screaming and then fall into just a state of fear. All I knew was that my father was scared and my mother was gone. Minutes later, I managed to get my father to drink some water and to sit up on the couch in the living room. I asked him again what had happened, and he honestly just wished I'd kept my mouth shut. He thought that he was tracking a black bear that had killed 3 deers the previous week. But this thing was really tracking them. Both my mother and father shot at it, point blank range, but it kept coming. It was injured, and it was bleeding, and it was screaming. But it dragged my mother into the woods, and that was it. I refused to believe what I was hearing, and I darted for the back door. When I swung it open, my father yelled for me to stop. I ran to the edge of the property, when suddenly I fell forwards as my father tackled me to the ground, pulling me up. I yelled into the darkness, "Mother!" My father quickly putting a hand over my mouth as loud roar echoes throughout the woods. We ran back to the house. The last thing my father says, It's still out there. They say grief affects people in different ways. My grief turned into anger and determination to kill whatever took my mother. The police arrived, and there was a search for my mother. They were blaming a bear. I never believed it. 3 years later, and I was asking my father to take me into the woods this time. His reaction to my constant nagging was always the same. Are you out of your mind, or just plain no? But I was persistent, and eventually he took me. We went to town to buy a few items we would need for the trip, even though my father said the farthest we would go is 4 miles. Deep down, I wasn't interested in deer or black bears. And I think my father knew it, since the gun he bought me could take a grizzly bear's head off. I had a 45-70. I don't really care if people call me crazy for thinking this way, because how would you feel if your mother was murdered? We left at dawn for the woods after packing up all 4 of our hunting equipments, and I felt both excited and nervous. Given everything that had happened, I began to wonder whether or not I was making a big mistake. Whatever killed my mother, I was now walking into its hunting grounds. I said all of this to my father, but he told me that he is better prepared for it now than he was before. Our guns and ammunition could drop nearly anything. I replied, "That's exactly it, Father. Nearly everything." He shrugged and urged me on. The respect I had for my father only grew as I listened to him talk about how being in the woods is easier for him than the city. At least in the woods you can be free. We set up camp a few minutes before dark, and by the time the last light was gone, we had a fire roaring in front of us. I talked about school and how hypocritical people can be sometimes. My father concurred, then adding that me and him are different than them, because we are so different. Everyone will never accept us. Me and my dad both knew what it was like to feel misunderstood by society. I think that was why he moved me and my mother out into the woods, honestly. No one can call you names or bully you if they can't find you. Going to school was never easy for me, since my friends and I would always get made fun of, and I would tell them to just stay away from me. The reason being because I scared them, even though I couldn't understand what was so scary about me. I was 4'10" with broad shoulders and a medium build. I wore dark clothing since I was a child, which made all the parents think I was goth or a Satanist. But I mainly wore them because they made me feel safe, as odd as it sounds, and it's all we could afford. Everyone else wore bright clothing except me. I thought about these things as I finished eating my protein bar and my father finished his whiskey, which he said was water, but I knew it was really in the canteen. You would think for someone who always loved to listen to the crickets at night that I would be asleep, but 3 hours into the night I was still wide awake. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't bring any mosquito repellent, and I was quickly turning into a feast for them. Seconds later, the woods came alive with the sounds of small animals scurrying around on the forest floor. Then foxes and owls began calling out to each other. "I wonder what has all of you so riled up," I whispered as I then saw 5 deer suddenly dart in front of me. This quickly prompted my father to wake up and grab his gun. "I think I know," he whispered. "Dad, what's going on?" I asked, but all he did was put a finger to his lips as he peered into the darkness. There was a loud thing from behind us, followed by the sound of twigs snapping under the weight of something heavy and close by. Soon more twigs began to snap in nearly every direction. Maybe it's a deer. There was a loud grunt to the right of me, and I felt my father press his back against me. He whispered for me to stay close to him and to shoot if I see anything move toward us, but I couldn't see anything. Suddenly my father fires a shot, then runs into the woods yelling, "I got it, I got it." I yell for my dad to come back, but no sooner do the words leave my mouth do I hear him screaming in agony, followed by a loud, wet crunch and a low growl. The woods went completely quiet, save for the sound of branches snapping as something slowly and methodically circled around our campsite. The woods was nearly out now, and whatever was in the woods was getting closer to me. I could see it. I was shaking, and the gun in my hand shook so much that I thought I would eventually fall out of my hand. But I gripped it tight as I could. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. God knows I felt like running, but my legs were frozen in place. The fire now had dwindled down to a few smoldering embers, and with the last dying flame, my hope for tomorrow died with it. After all of this time I had spent preparing myself to confront the very thing that tore my family away from me, instead of facing it with courage, I felt like wetting myself. Suddenly felt myself being knocked to the ground by something heavily. And as I tried to crawl away, something heavy, and as just clamped down on my right leg. Whatever it was, its grip was like a vice as it dragged me toward my now smoldering fire. Sparks flew up as whatever it was got some of it in its face and let go of my leg. It took the opportunity as whatever it was grunted in pain, grabbing a flare out of my coat pocket. I ignited it. The thing had me by the foot. It was fully grown black bear, and its paws were now on my gun. But these were not paws, these were human-like hands. Trying to walk backwards away from it, it tripped and fell onto the ground, and sounds like it got its attention. It stood up on its hind legs, and I thought for sure this was it. It roared, and I waited for the end. But instead of coming toward me, the bear stopped. Or was this a bear? Is that a human face I see in the lights? And it stared at me. Another roar rings out. The fire now had been stepped on. It kind of burns a little brighter, and I can tell that the fire is bothering him. He does not like the fire. Man, that's weird, guys. That fire saved him. My legs were tired, and my lungs felt like they were going to burst. I kept going. I was running as hard as I could. I didn't dare slow down. Then I heard something to the left of me with the flare in my left hand. I looked to see the bear. Bigfoot? Running beside me? It never once made a move toward me, and I don't think it really cared. Whatever it was frightening, and it just wanted to get as far away from it as possible. That's all I wanted. I couldn't keep my pace up, and the second I slowed down, this thing, it began nipping at me. It dropped to all fours and would bite at me. I shouldn't have known better than to let my guard down. Backing away, I dropped the flare and raised my rifle and shot until a loud roar from the 45-70 echoed into the distance. I missed the shot. This thing took advantage of this moment, and it clamped down on my right arm, causing me to drop my gun quickly. I jammed my flare into its face, and it inspired it to run. And as it ran away, I could see the flares burning onto its face as it let out a loud roar, taking its hands, slapping trees, knocking the bark from them, pushing over little saplings that bursted through the woods. I then ran for home. I could see the yard light through the trees, and I ran for the yard light as hard as I could, keeping the light focused. And as I made it home, I called 911. The police arrived. A search was conducted the next morning. My dad was found shredded. My mom was later found upon the mountain shredded. They were both half-eaten, and the medical examiner blamed both of it on bears. So I've now lost my mom and dad to a bear with regular hands, a human-like face with a snout. I'm telling you, it was a human-like face with a snout. I'd done the police report, and I was threatened that if I was to lie on the report that they would arrest me for making a false report. I told them what I seen. They said I was in shock. The doctor concurred. They all said it was just a bear. I know what took my mom and dad. I can't go back to the woods as much as I would like to. I would love to get revenge on this creature, but I know that it's took both of my family members, and it would probably take me. Plus, I don't have the guts or the nerves to even return to the woods. I now live in the city, house by house by house, side by side us, in front of us, behind us. And I still get scared at night, but I will never leave the city. I've became what we always hated. I'm a city person now. So what do you think of that, guys? They tell him it's a bear. The doctor concurs. Sounds like they already had their minds made up. This poor guy lost his mom and his dad to it. Why do you think it attacked them? You think it's because they was hunting it? Do you think that's what caused it to reach out? Let me know what you all think in the comments. Thank you for listening to another drop. Don't forget, this Friday night we're doing a fundraiser for Hunter, and there's links in the description if you would like to help now. God bless, and we'll see you on the next one.